Good morning, dear friends. The outer weather is a little rainy. How's the inner weather? I'd like to begin in a familiar way with two options. One is to simply remain silent, and the other is to take a minute or two, 3 maybe, to turn to a neighbor, introduce yourself, and let's just have something simple like 1 or 2 things in your life that you're really grateful for. So please have at it. It starts so little and then it gets big fast. It's a crescendo, right? Who's here for the first time? Please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, how brave of you. Yeah, it's a big deal. I hope that this morning is of great use to you, and that you find here a practice and perhaps a community that could really welcome you into your heart. And the way it goes this morning, we're going to do a little chant in our song, and then a little guided meditation for until around 9:45, and then Jim will 10:45. Yeah. Time and dates. I am calendar challenged, so dates that appear, or time too.
Maybe it's all day sit.
Yeah.
9:45
I see. Who knows? No, we're going to sit from 9:45. That's a good idea. There will be bathroom breaks, and and then Jim will do some qigong with us, or you. I'm going to go visit with the kids at that time, and then Avi will do some announcements, and then I'm going to come back to talk a little bit about Ruth Dennison, my teacher of 40 years, who passed away 4 years ago, and today is her birthday. around the Western world, there's various sits and celebrations happening. And then I want to talk about gardening, the gardening of our own hearts. The Buddhist model is a very, I'm thinking of this because I got a lot to do in the rain today, putting the garden to bed. And the Buddha used gardening metaphors a lot. That the word meditation comes from the word in the Pali language, bhavana, B-H-A-V-A-N-A. And to bhavana means to cultivate. So I could say I'm going out, and I guess I'm putting it to bed, but when you're cultivating, I would say I'm going to bhavana my garden. And this training is about bhavaning, training our mind. And the fact that it's trainable is pretty remarkable. The fact that we can actually have we have agency with our own mind, and therefore with our lives, which is pretty remarkable. Really, it doesn't mean control, but I've tried that. But it does mean agency. And this chant that we're going to do, I take refuge in the Buddha, the one who shows me the way in this life. Namo Buddhaya, Namo Buddhaya, Namo Buddhaya. There was a person, Siddhartha Gautama, who woke up, became a Buddha long time ago, 2,600 years. But this refuge is in the Buddha now that we are, that awakeness, that consciousness that's here right now. We don't have to go far to find the Buddha. In fact, we're it. And then refuge in the Dharma, which is both the practice and what we find when we practice, the natural laws of the universe. And Sangha, the community of practice. And it's a long lineage of practice down from the time of the Buddha. So we're in good company, and I always like to put into that that we practice as part of the great Sangha of life. Right now there are hundreds of gazillions of us alive here on the earth. Some of us humans, others of us insects, our siblings of the air, the earth, and the waters. And so to practice realizing that we are us, we are this great mysterious experiment on the planet Earth. So the experiment of life. Is that coming out there? I take refuge in the Buddha, the one who shows me the way in this life. Namo Buddhaya, Namo Buddhaya, Namo Buddhaya. Dharma, I take refuge in the Dharma, the way of understanding and love. Namo Dharmaya, Namo Dharmaya, Namo Dharmaya. Sangha, I take refuge in the Sangha, the community of mindful harmony. Namo Sanghaya, Namo Sanghaya, Namo Sanghaya. Once more, I take refuge in the Buddha, the one who shows me the way in this life. Namo Buddhaya, Namo Buddhaya, Namo Buddhaya. I take refuge in the Dharma, the way of understanding and love. Namo Dharmaya, Namo Dharmaya, Namo Dharmaya. I take refuge in the Sangha, the community of mindful harmony. Namo Sanghaya, Namo Sanghaya, Namo Sanghaya. There is an unlimited number of activities we could pursue when sitting here. We could daydream, we could plan a vacation, we could go into remorse about something from the past, or anger or resentment about something from the past. We could create anxiety about the future. We could do visualizations, prayers. It really is an unlimited number of possibilities. This training from the Buddha suggests that we begin by reminding ourselves of some gratitude. We are hardwired to see the failures of things and the danger, the problems. This had significant survival value for us as a species. So a moment of gratitude, conjuring something up to be grateful for, that we are grateful for. And then the practice of what could best be called heart-mindfulness. The practice of being present and aware, which usually starts with the body, with the sensations of sitting here and being alive. The body touching the cushion or the floor. The experience of warmth and coolness, comfort and discomfort. Being open to the sounds that come to the ear. And to the fact that we are breathing, the body breathes. It is our intimate lifetime connection with everything else that lives. And it isn't some improved breathing, some diaphragmatic or special breathing. It's simply the body relaxed and breathing, doing what it does. What's special about it, though, is that we have this intention to stay present and engaged and curious, attentive, concentrated, aware of this next breathing in, of the next breathing out. And it's the actual sensations of breathing or of the body breathing that we attend to, not some imagination of breathing in through the feet or the hands, or not some image of light, or it's just this miracle of breathing in and breathing out, which is sensed in the torso, breath, chest, abdomen, or possibly at the nostrils. Just this. And then we notice that the mind has other plans. It's commonly said the mind has a mind of its own. So we go into a sort of trance. No mindfulness, just thoughts. Maybe a worry, a plan, figuring something out, an opinion, an emotion. And then we have this intention to stay with the sensations of breathing. So then there's a mysterious, miraculous waking up that happens. Awareness itself notices that the mind is wandering, and then there's the opportunity to come back to the breath. No violence, no urgency. Just home to breathing. Noticing the beginning of this next breath. Staying with it, gently, kindly. like everything else in our universe. Everything else since the Great Flash or the Big Bang, 14 point some billion years ago. The breath has a beginning. And it really comes out of nowhere. Right? Between in-breathing and out-breathing, or out-breathing and in-breathing, there's often a pause. Awareness doesn't end necessarily at all, but breathing does. And then Genesis, the next breath. And then the breath, the sensations of this mystery breathes in, and there's sensations to fullness, and then there's breathing out. Sometimes the mind will stay closely, intimately oriented, attending to the sensations of breathing. Other times it's hard to find the breath at all. There are storms of desire and wanting, grasping, and not wanting, disliking, even hating, restlessness, agitation, worry, sleepy dullness and sloth and torpor, doubt, and the whole palette of emotions. We're not trying to get rid of all these other phenomena. We're actually using mindfulness of breathing to become very curious, even avid observers of everything else that happens. So when you can, abiding gently, lovingly in breathing in and out, awakening to everything else that happens. This is the work of bhavana. Whenever we direct awareness toward the primary object of the breath, and then make that subtle effort to keep it there, we are cultivating concentration. The background intention and practice of being awake, of noticing when the mind is doing something else, or noticing that the mind is, in fact, concentrated. This is mindfulness. These are the wings of awakening. Together they bring all the other wholesome crops into being. Curiosity, energy, joy, tranquility, equanimity. All these other skills or capacities come with concentration and mindfulness. Of course, as in any garden, there are weeds, sometimes a lot. And while the weeds are not intrinsically bad, they're not what we're intending to cultivate, so we do our best to uproot them. And so we notice the mind filled with lust or hatred or worry or fear or loneliness, with no rancor, with no animosity really. We notice, yes, that's what's happening. My intention is to stay with the breath, so here I go, back to the breath. And we do this 12 times or 10 times or 500,000 times or over a lifetime millions of times. And we cultivate a consciousness which is awake, present, and that results in vastly less suffering. It's remarkable that something so simple could have such a vast effect. Breathing in and knowing it. Breathing out and knowing it. Practicing with great kindness, compassion, and love. Mercy. We're used to moving all the time. Whenever there's discomfort, we move away from it. This has historically had some tremendous survival value. Move away from discomfort, move toward pleasure. But this next step of evolution of consciousness requires that we learn to bear discomfort and wake up to what it is. To learn to not suffer when there's discomfort or frustration or failure. So the little pains that come or the big pains that come in meditation, at first we just acknowledge, sit with them. If they become strong, we actually turn toward them and become very intimate and loving and compassionate. Really awake. Please now become aware of where your body touches the cushion or the chair. Notice the aliveness in what you think of as your hands, fingers, thumbs. Notice how you can differentiate between fingers. The index finger of the left hand and then the right hand. Notice the aliveness in what you call your face. The lips, the cheeks, the eyes and forehead. And noticing what's necessary to open the eyes. First, an intention in the mind, and then a willing of the eyelids to be pulled up. And then seeing starts. Seeing. Awareness of seeing, mindful of seeing. Noticing the state of mind and body after this little while of sitting has a huge impact. Normalization of bodily function. If you tend toward all kinds of imbalances in the body, they balance out a bunch when we're sitting. Ruth Denison was a pioneer. One of the first insight meditation teachers in the West. And she witnessed that her students were pretty restless. And so she thought, why not have them move? And she had trained with a woman named Charlotte Selver, who was a German movement therapist, very famous at that time. There's a picture on the RuthDenison.com website of Ruth with Charlotte was 101, and she was guiding a workshop. Ruth was sitting with her at 101 years old in mindful movement, basically. Anyway, Ruth was revolutionary. At first, she was not respected by the other teachers in the West because, everyone knows you don't get enlightened by dancing. But she persisted, and now almost every insight meditation retreat, there's a movement of some kind. So she really transformed the Dharma in the West. And she was very playful. She created rituals out of everything. She could always find a way to ritualize something. And she was in this hall in 2004, I forget the month, when we had our grand opening. And she created quite a thing. One part of it was she sat in a throne. Where's that white chair? I don't know. She sat in the front, and everyone, we had flowers for everybody, and I had intended it quite differently. But everyone lined up and came in. It took 2.5 hours. And people came up, and everyone had a personal meeting with her. It was quite something. But she also did this that I'm going to share with you now. Lots of practices of moving and voicing, singing. And so it's all done mindfully. It goes like this. I'm going to stand. Oh boy, stiff. I've been to the gym 3 times in a week and none before that. So it's a new leaf turned. So, this picture was at her memorial service, and this very piece of paper was there. So the song goes like this. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to me. Every day are we born. Have to get the words right. Every day are we free. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to me. Every day are we born. Every day are we free. So I invite you to stand and mindfully find a partner. And it goes like this. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to me. Mindfully, every day are we born. Every day are we free. Find another partner. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to me. Every day are we born. Every day are we free. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to me. Every day are we born. Every day are we free. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to me. Every day are we born. Every day are we free. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to me. Every day are we born. Every day are we free. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to me. Every day are we born. Every day are we free. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to me. Every day are we born. Every day are we free. Only 5 more repetitions. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to me. Every day are we born. Every day are we free. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to me. Every day are we born. Every day are we free. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to me. Every day are we born. Every day are we free. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to me. Every day are we born. Every day are we free. birthday to me. Every day are we born. Every day are we free. The bonus one. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to me. Every day are we born. Every day are we free. Standing and knowing it, moving and knowing it. Excuse me. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to me. Every day are we born. Every day are we free. Now with Ruth, we would do that for an hour. Really. And you'd go through all kinds of stuff. It's like, enough already. I mean, don't you know how to do anything else? And it's like, and then you discover a new level of joy. And you discover how controlling the mind is, and how it's, well, this shouldn't be like this, or and you start discovering, you meet a person, and every person has a different atmosphere. It's a different encounter with every person. And so then you start noticing that, and then you realize, wow, this happens all day, every day in my life. I'm always meeting someone, and then there's a feeling, there's a judgment, or an anxiety, or an excitement, or oh God, this again. With him, it's like that. Jim was sitting in my office the other day, and we came out of meditation together, and he was just so gorgeous. I took out my camera and took a picture of him. And I sent it around to all the teachers and totally embarrassed him. But it's look at this guy. It's amazing. So this kind of practice is powerful, right? In terms of taking meditation from being, this is what I call meditation, into every activity in daily life, which is when it just takes off, because that's what it's about, living. This is a really fine microphone. On Broadway, they put them here, right? So you don't see it anywhere on them, but they're right here or sometimes back here, and works. Ready?
All right. Hello. Would you like to stand with me? Thank you. My favorite memory of Ruth was on a retreat in another building over on Madison, where we had sack lunches, and we were all sitting around, and she asked us to open up the sack lunch, and then, reach out for your sandwich, and 40 minutes later, we could bite it. She had all these things about how you reach, how you lift, how you smell, taking a little piece, putting it on your tongue. It was just went on and on and on. And that sandwich smell just kept, So, patience. Patience with this body that gets hungry, that gets stiff. And it doesn't take much to get into a flow. You just move the center of gravity, intend to move the center of gravity over, and then return it without stressing. We're going to our limit, but we're not stressing. And when we get to the limit, there's this activation of some Qigong teachers talk about the subtle energy body. It takes energy to engage in the earth with your foot and be upright and have a whole bunch of your body just resting over here. And so that there's more engagement. You can be aware of that subtle energy. And then real simple things, just raising your arm and letting it come down. One fellow just opens his hands, bends at the wrists, turns and presses forward gently, turns in, and then up and out. And it's a very simple breath exercise. You breathe in, and you breathe out through the mouth. Breathe in, and out through the mouth. I forgot to say the pause, but you figured it out. In, out. Long in. Now, just hold still and feel the dynamism, the flow of energy in the body. Someplace you're going to feel, everybody's different, but it may be the substantive pressure on the bottoms of your feet, maybe the liquid feeling in the wrists and the hands. We stretch. Let's do that again. Turn your fingers in and let them face each other, and then all the way up, and feel how easy, well, some of us, some days are better than others, how easy it is to turn all the angles that are necessary. First, lifting the fingers, pointing them in, all the joints that are involved in the shoulders, pressing up from the floor, and then releasing. It's a long in-breath. Press and release. And vocalizing helps too. Fingers in, breathe in, press, and once more. So these scientists that know how to measure these things measure the smoothness of glass. I'm not sure what they use to, but of the amount of friction it takes something to move across glass. That is nothing compared to the release and the smoothness in the joints. Our joints are smoother than glass. And if they get stiff from sitting too long, or working on computers, then we have to go back to the first one. Palm forward, feel the twisting, lifting, twisting, pressing. There's no obstacles. There's gliding of one surface to another. Breathing in, gliding out, gliding up, and out. And in Tai Chi practice, we always begin with sinking into the feet and feeling the substance, feeling the earthiness of the lower body, so that the upper body just kind of floats around like one of those funny dolls with the sand in the bottom. When I was a kid, there was a thing in the comics called Joe Palooka. Anybody remember that? And I had a Joe Palooka punching bag. and it had sand in the bottom, and I hit it, and then it'd come back, and then I hit it, and it'd come back. So anyway, what my Tai Chi teacher would say is, be like that sand in the bottom. You know, the earth is in the bottom. And then all this, it's not glass, but it's water in the joints above. So everything from the waist up is floating in the air or floating in the water. And you raise your arms and open the joints in your shoulder. You turn your hands and bring them in a little bit and open the joints in your wrist, and then you sink. So it's like lifting water out of a creek and then just pouring that liquid into your legs. So everything is smooth, everything is easy, but the feet are definitely engaged with the earth through the toes, through the heels, through the edges on the outside, depending upon our insole or our instep. We have more or less contact, but there's vitality in the instep. Even if you have high arches, there's energy flowing across that arch up into the rest of the body to be smooth and silky. And then reaching across, we can focus our attention on the upper hand and let the other hand face the earth, and then turn and change and come back with the focus again on the upper hand. It's a different hand, but it's the same idea, that there's a cloud on the upper hand that's floating across the sky. And then there's a shadow on the earth. And what the lower hand is doing is touching the earth, even though it's not physically touching. It's transferring from the hands through the feet into the earth, engaging in the earth element. And then we breathe as we lift, and we breathe out. So we have the air element, the watery element in the joints. And if we pay close attention, breathing in through the nose and out through the mouth, we can detect the fire. We breathe in cool air, and what we release is warm from all the fires inside, all the cells that are digesting energy from our breakfast, from the air we breathe, from all sorts of different sources, but it's a fiery furnace inside. So we take in the cool air, and warm air comes out. So all four elements are united in one gesture. We call it cloud hands, but there's earth and water and air and fire. And it's all in a flow. Every second is impermanent. Every micro gesture is impermanent. There's nothing holding. The stickiness of the mind is very different by comparison. The body flows until the mind disturbs it by putting it in front of a computer or a dashboard on a car. Okay, then bring the feet together. Yikes. Well, Robert went over too. Anyway, bring the feet together and just keep your feet close together, but let everything else in the body be free. What does your body want to do? Where does it want to go? How does it want to twist? The wind in the willow. There's just this lightness in the body after we've worked with energy. The flow is going, it's purified, it's rejuvenated the body, but there's still little places that I'd like to do something with this stagnation. Let it flow. And nothing is permanent except our position with our feet, which is an artificial framework that we have to use to bring the attention to the flow that we are. So, take a breath, sink, lift up, and release warm air. Thank you, Ruth, for teaching me to move. Thank you all for moving with me.
Good morning, Sangha. Good morning out there in internet land. My name is Avi. I'm community coordinator for PIMC. My pronouns are male pronouns. Happy Ruth's birthday to all of you. And also, it's another special day for all of you for whom Judaism is part of your spiritual path. Happy New Year. L'Shana Tova. We have a lot going on. So first thing, in terms of volunteer stuff, we are always looking for people to volunteer with the little ones in the Sunday Children's Education Program. If you can just take an hour or even 2 hours, just come in and be there with the kids, but 1 hour is fine. And if you did that once, that would be great. If you could do it on a regular basis, that would be superb. And this would be a way in which you can help this Sangha move forward into the future and support the next generation of meditators who one day will be sitting out here in the Dharma Hall. Details are on the website on how to do that at the homepage. We also, I believe, need a third Sunday greeter. We still have that position open. If you are interested in getting to know everybody, because that's one of the reasons that the greeters team is so stable. The only reason that we've got a slot now is that Misty became co-coordinator for volunteers, and she'd been doing it for a long time. If you talk to any of the greeter team, they love doing it because they get to meet with you all, and they get to find out who's here, and they get to meet new people. So if that interests you as a way of becoming more deeply engaged with the Sangha, please let me know. I believe Ipsia is here today. Ipsia is right there, and she would be happy to talk with you about that. Another thing is that we are planning on some kind of a gardening work party sometime soon. We are having a Karma Yoga Volunteer Service Day at the end of October, but we are also looking to do some gardening stuff. Clara, are you around? So Clara is one of the co-coordinators for the gardening team. She would be happy to talk with you about ways in which you can help. And it's really a lot of fun to get in there and keep this place beautiful and get your hands in the dirt a little bit. We don't have much left to do with winter coming on fast, but there are some things that need to be done to take care of our beautiful property. On Monday, September 3rd, the Noble Eightfold Path class has been canceled. We did not quite have enough people signed up for it, but look for it if you are interested in it coming up later in the year or maybe at the beginning of the new year. On Saturday, October 5th, we've got our first Saturday monthly day-long retreat on October 5th, and that's going to be with Gary, and the theme is going to be self-care. On Sunday, October 6th, we've got our monthly newcomer orientation session with Robert. That's at 9 o'clock during the individual sits that happen here. On Sunday, October 6th, we also have our next monthly meeting of the Engaging the Dharma Initiative, our local project where we take what we learn on the cushion and we bring it out into the community in terms of mindful action. Is there anybody here from Engaging the Dharma who might be? Yeah, so KB, could you raise your hand? So just if you have questions about Engaging the Dharma, KB would be happy to talk with you, I'm sure. Let's see what else. So on Tuesday, October 8th, we've got our Skillful Speech Nonviolent Communication Practice Group. On Saturday, October 12th, Robert has his 5-day retreat starting at Hollyhock, British Columbia. There is information on the website under the retreats submenu. On Sunday, October 13th, we've got our second Sunday PIMC potluck. And on the 19th, we've got Caverly Morgan, who is the creator of Peace in Schools, a really magnificent teacher who has agreed to teach here. We've also got a Qigong retreat half day with Jim. And then we've got Buddhist movie night, where we're going to be screening Kumare. I don't know if you've seen that movie, but it's fascinating about a guy who pretends to be a guru and then becomes the real deal. Then on Saturday, October 26th, we've got our fall Karma Yoga service, volunteer day, and pizza party because, well, you get a group of people together, you got to have pizza. So we will make sure about that. And then on Sunday, the 27th, Robert has another retreat, this time at Brighton Bush for 5 days. We also have Dharma consultations available with Jim. If you have issues that are coming up in your practice or you want a quick on-ramp to start your practice, Jim would be happy to work with you for about 20 minutes today. If you are not able to do that today, please contact me and I can connect you with the Teachers Council and we would be able to find somebody to spend some time with you, either in person or over the phone. And I believe that's it. Oh, yeah. Yes, parents, yes. For those of you, thank you, Tia. For those of you who are parents who are interested in issues relating to families with kids, we've got a special parents group that is meeting in the living room. The children's room at 12:30, it's going to start. Robert will be showing up there at some point, and we're going to start trying to have the parents get more involved with one another and get to know one another better to support the idea of more parent-friendly, family-friendly kinds of activities here at PIMC. So please stay and join us. Also going along with that, as with every Sunday, there'll be tea and coffee and some snacks after the gathering today. So please join us and get to know some people. So thank you very much for being here on this rainy Sunday. Blessings to you all. Have a great Sunday.
Hello to those of you joining us on the internet. And those of you joining us here in the hall. I have another couple of Ruth Dennison stories to share with you. (1982) No, it was earlier, 1981. I had been in Burma in 1979 for a week, where I got to do novice ordination with a very famous old monk named Tongpulu Sayadaw. He was kind of like the Dalai Lama ×3 in Burmese Buddhism. He was the focus of, he was 82. That's another whole story. But he came to town. He came to town. He came to North America, to Palo Alto, a couple of years later, and I drove down to just pay my respects, not to stay and do a retreat or anything, but just to connect in for a day. And while I was there, I was in the kitchen, and a woman with a thick German accent came in with a bee sting. And at that point, I was doing a lot of body work, and it was in her hand. It was quite swollen, and so I was rubbing her arm, and we were talking, and we exchanged names, and she said that she was Ruth Dennison. And I had heard of her as one of the 4 teachers that Uba Kin had told to teach. For the 4 Westerners, there was Ruth and a man called Goenka, some of you have probably heard of, and John Coleman and Robert Hover. And the 2 guys had quit teaching already, so Ruth was one of the descendants of Uba Kin. And we started to talk, and we went from the kitchen to her van. She had a camping van, where we talked for more than 6 hours. And it was a conversation that lit up my life. It's like, here's somebody who really understands the Dharma and is willing to talk to me, right, and really listen. And one of her phrases about herself was, "Darling, I like to get under their skin." She really paid attention, and she developed a relationship with her students. At this second memorial service, which was at Spirit Rock, there were about 150 people there. And I asked in my little presentation that I got to do, how many of you feel like you had a personal, special sort of relationship with Ruth? And it was every person in the room. And she went really out of her way to get to know people, and because she cared, and she was marvelous in that way. So I started following her around to her retreats, and then I wound up managing her retreats. And there came a point where I was at a retreat. It was, my son was 7 months old, and we had come to a Stephen Levine retreat before, and then my wife and the kid were going to go home, and I was going to stay with Ruth. And we came to the end. A moment came. All the context doesn't really matter. And I had asked Ruth if she would announce a class that I was offering here in Portland, kind of to support my Dharma teaching. And it came to very close to the end of the retreat, and she hadn't mentioned it. And I was at the back of the room, and then she looked over at me and said, "Come out here." And she did a Dharma transmission ceremony, a recognition that I should be teaching. And it was very beautiful in her way. She had some water, and she sprinkled that on me, and some rose petals, and said some nice things. And then she hugged me very closely and whispered the secret teaching into my ear, the teacher transmission teaching. And it goes like this. It went like this. Don't think this makes you any better than anybody else. All it means is you have to practice twice as hard as any of your students and do your best to keep your ethical act together. Pretty fine teaching, huh? Some years later, she came. Every now and then she'd come. And she came to a gathering somewhere here in Portland. And we were all sitting on the floor. It was when I could sit on the floor fairly functionally. Sitting on the floor, and one of my students asked her, "Why did you choose Robert as a teacher?" And she came over and patted my head and said, "Well, it wasn't because of any great spiritual attainment. But he loves the Dharma. It runs in his veins, and he'll grow into the role." And I did. And I am. And there's another story that it's really potent. It was I got my dates wrong. It was the 70s. Things were pretty crazy in the 70s. And the woman with whom I was in a long-term intimate relationship visited the East Coast and fell in love with, again, her high school sweetheart. And that created a bit of a mess, right? When she came back and she got off the plane, I could feel it. So 6 months or a few months later, she really wanted to go see this guy. And I didn't have the wherewithal at that point to say, I think that's really crazy, and no. But she really wanted to go, and so I got brave and put her on the plane. And she was on the way. They were meeting in a hotel in Chicago for several days. And I went nuts. I mean, a codependent despair. I mean, I didn't know what to do. I was out of control inside. And the second day of that out of control madness, I went on retreat with Ruth. And I showed up there, really a crazy person. From the outside, it wouldn't be apparent right away, but I was just floridly insane inside. And the first night, I talked with her about it, and she said, come meet me in my cabin. It was a retreat at a very moldy old camp, church camp. And so there I was, insane, crying, freaking out. And, oh, Michael, you dear, thank you. How did you know? Oh, let's put it here, please. Thanks. The forbidden drinking in the Dharma hall. Uh-oh. Do as I say, not as I do. This, by the way, is Ruth's ashes. And if you're ever interested, just come up and twist it. And it actually comes apart, and there are some bone fragments. And I encourage you to try it sometime, because that's what we are. A few little bits of calcium. And these are, I asked them not to crush the bones up, particularly, so this it's actually bone fragments. You can see them. So where was I? Oh yeah, I was freaking out. And Ruth stayed up all night with me. And I'd start to go off into this, having these fantasies of them in the hotel together. And she would do this. Wake up! You're hallucinating. And I'd say, but they're in a hotel room in bed. And she would say, where? Show me. This exists. Oops. That's interesting. I'm okay. My watch tells the world, if I've fallen, I fell. I did not fall. I clapped my hands. It's for us elders. If you fall, it'll call help. Anyway, she kept doing this and it was a huge teaching for me, because at that point I couldn't very well differentiate between my hysterical freak out that I would go into and reality. And she stayed up all night. Oh, and she baked apples. She had some aluminum foil, and she baked apples and had some nuts and tea. And we basically had a let's bring Robert to sanity party all night. And then she taught all the next day. And I saw her do that kind of thing with a lot of people over the years. Not, obviously not the same context, but so it was an incredible privilege to have her as an important, my central teacher, my spiritual mother of a lifetime, and changed my life, and there through me lots of other lives. And this center came about because of her. The first thing she did in 1990 was to hand me a check for $10,000 and said, start a center. And I went, I have no idea how to do that. And she said, there's much more of this where this comes from. And so this center is here because of her pushing, actually. And all of the good things that happen here come out of that. There's a meditation tonight at 6 p.m. in Europe and the United States, 6 to 6:30, in honor of Ruth. So if you'd like to join in on that, that's happening. Okay. Ruth married. There's a great book about Ruth called Dancing in the Dharma. Good read. By, forgetting her name, how silly. Anyway, you can find it by title. She met Henry Denison, who was of the Denison Railway. They owned half of the land between Palm Springs and San Diego. And Henry was for 6 or 10 years a Sri Ramakrishna Swami. And then they got married, and that put her into a very elite position. And their home became the landing point for the Roshis that came from Japan. They'd come and they'd stay with them a while, and Alan Watts and that crowd hung out there a lot. In fact, this tabletop that is behind the Buddha, Ruth made, and when she gave it to me for this purpose, she said, darling, around this table sat Alan Watts and I'm forgetting who else, but it was a who's who of Buddhist literary people and so on. And they were on acid, and I was their mama. So she was very plugged in, and she was of great assistance to Joseph Goldstein and Jack Kornfield and the teachers of that generation that she could be of help to. Okay, Ruth. I guess one more thing's coming to mind. Henry developed dementia, and she took care of him basically single-handedly in a house in the desert in Yucca Valley for several years. Quite a devotion. Flooded with thoughts and memories. She loved Gounod, a French composer, Gounod's Requiem, particularly the third track. And so in the latter years, I would go visit her, and we would play Gounod late into the night, and she would sing and play air piano. And then I started playing the guitar around that period, and I bring my guitar down, and very, rudimentary beginnings of guitar, and we'd sing songs that we knew, and she'd play air guitar, and I'd play air piano, and I'd play the guitar. It was quite something. Okay. So I talked about bhavana, cultivation. I've been privileged in my role teaching over 30 years now to see so many people encounter the Dharma and have their lives change. That in school, even in psychology school, they don't have particularly effective tools or even the interest in, turn around and observe your own mind. One of my teachers, a man, Anagarika Munindra, said to Joseph Goldstein, so you come and you want to study the mind? Well, sit down, stop, pay attention. You have one. And it's true that we can, through observing our own mind, have an influence on it. And a really deep influence. How many of you know that? Raise your hand if you're pretty convinced. Okay. So there's the Eightfold Path, which is a way of life. And any piece of it, I could open up an accordion it open, and it's an hour or two's Dharma talk, and then a week of meditation to see, is this true? So, we discover pretty early on that awareness exists. And we can know when it's there, and we can notice how we fall off into trance, how we go into these incredible stories, and like that powerful trance that I was going into that night with Ruth. So we go into these trances, and at the most fundamental level, we learn how to use mindfulness of breathing or some other simple concentration practice to calm ourselves down and to experience a modicum of capacity to control our stress. That's a huge achievement, and what a relief. And it doesn't take that much to do that. And then as we practice and we start sitting through the craziness of our emotional storms, we begin to take responsibility for, and we can see and know what's happening in our emotional realm. We become more psychologically and emotionally healthy. An experience of that for myself was after my first retreat in India in 1971. My girlfriend and I continued to travel around India, and she had told me on that trip that she wasn't going to marry me and live happily. You can see a theme, maybe. She wasn't going to marry me and live happily ever after, and so I freaked out. And that's how I actually got on that first meditation retreat. And we continued our journey another 5 months, which was pretty painful. But we were in Goa, in India, the west coast, quite a hippie and lovely place to be. And we had one of our fights, which never really turned into a fight. We didn't know how to get stuff on the table, but I went for a walk, and I walked through the night on the little narrow streets of Goa, and something happened. This storm, and what it was rage. I didn't know because I was unable. I was so in denial. It was happening just in the unconscious, but I was getting little glimpses of it. And around dawn, it subsided and then went away. And I'd received a glimpse, a gift of something that I was completely unconscious to or of. Because I was not a person who had anger. I had suppressed anger completely. And there was some work to do over that over the last 35, 40 years. But if we're willing to stop and pay attention, then our emotional life begins to be apparent to us. And there's a saying, meditation is one embarrassment to the ego after another. Because we discover there's hatred and jealousy and lust and fear and despair. It's all in us. And anything we're not in touch with will, in time, erupt. And those are times when it's very helpful to have a community and a teacher, because it can seem so wrong. This must be wrong. I must be doing something wrong because at this moment I'm feeling so really terrible. And I'm having these hateful, in my case, I'm having these hateful thoughts about people. This isn't me. The psychology world says it's ego-dystonic. It's like not me. But in fact, it is. And my behavior to anyone outside of me, my behavior had that in it. But I didn't know. About a year after that, I was back in Canada. I did the Knowles National Outdoor Leadership School. I did a 5-week mountaineering instructor certification course. And it was great, in the Tetons. And at the feedback session with the instructors, they were glowing in their reports of, you're a great climber and your skills are really terrific. There's just this one thing you need to work on, and that is your anger. And I said, what do you mean, my anger? And they described 3 instances when I had said or done things which were pretty nasty. And it was such a shock to my ego. I managed, I think, to get out of the meeting without showing hugely how upset I was and angry at them. And I raced up a trail. I climbed about 2,000 or 3,000 feet up this, got to the top, and there was a thunderstorm, and I found a big mushroom that was edible. But I didn't know what was going on. I was that unaware of how angry I was underneath. I also had really bad migraines, and I had terrible allergies, both of which diminished stunningly. And when I got into therapy and started working on the anger and realized I didn't have to hold it at bay, I had to learn how to not act it out. So, as we meditate, we discover that that which we're repressing becomes available, and also we learn how to relax more. And then if we learn the path, if we get a chance to look at the map, here's my, this is the map of wise intention. And so there's wise understanding, the worldview, and then there's wise intention, and then there's the moral and ethical behavior, skillful speech, and action and livelihood. And then there's effort, mindfulness, and concentration. It's an amazing grid of beautifully interwoven, it's really a jewel. So, our meditation develops, and we start, so the inner landscape is much more lit up than we've ever had it before. And we've learned the efforts to make. And it takes effort. Just to try to be concentrated takes effort, doesn't it? But there's 4 specific efforts. And the first one is when you discover that the mind is filled with, quote, unwholesome states. I'll come back to that, what that unwholesome means. Then why not try to restrain them? Don't get rid of them, but notice them for what they are, and then change the track. Like if you're all caught up in some thought, it's possible to, I think I'll pay attention to my breath instead. And in fact, that thought can disappear, and we can weaken it over time. Once these unwholesome states are gone, why not keep them gone? Why not stay? If you manage to change the track and get out of an angry rant that the mind is into, and you discover, there's the breath, why not continue that for a while? So we're planting a seed, we're planting a capacity of interrupting when the weeds have gone berserk. And then, kind of predictably, the third skillful effort is plant good seeds. Why not cultivate mindfulness? Why not cultivate concentration? Why not practice being patient? When impatience arises, study it and realize it's self-torture. Why not practice being patient? And so on. So and loving kindness. There are practices for loving kindness and forgiveness and compassion. These are all skills, capacities of the human body-mind that we can actually cultivate. These are crops we can... I'm having an image inside. I planted 4 sunflower plants this year. There were a few last year. The whole garden it's like this sunflower rodeo. It's incredible. And they've done real well. They're all with the rain. So bring wholesome states into being, and then once they're up, keep them going. I have a favorite story about that. In brief, I was on my way to visit my daughter who was in college in California. Got up, I was tired, got to the airport grumpy. And on the plane, I got some really deep rest somehow. And I woke up in this loving kindness space. Just everyone was so beautiful. And I got to Sacramento, and I just sat on the plane, delighted. It's like so easy to be loving. And in Sacramento, I got off the plane, and I had bought a Time magazine at the airport, thinking, well, I'll read this on the plane, and I can indulge in some of this stuff. And I got there, I went and sat down and started to read Time, and I realized this is ridiculous. Because when such a state is up, keep it going. So I walked around Sacramento airport surreptitiously, carefully, just looking at people, and they were all so beautiful. Really, just beauty is in the eye of the beholder. That's really true. And so then I went off, and lots of late nights in California. And on the way back at Sacramento, I was ready for the same thing to happen. No way. It was. So, restrain unwholesome states, keep them restrained. Bring wholesome states into being, and then keep them going. Cultivate. This is the garden. We can do this. It's not rocket science. It's just simply knowing. It's such a silly saying. Rocket science is so simple, realistically. It's just math and physics. But this is the control room of our lives. So then back to the second aspect of the Eightfold Path, which is called right intention or skillful intention. And it comes out of wise understanding. If we know, if we're getting a glimpse, everything really is impermanent. And there's no way to achieve lasting satisfaction in human life because everything's always changing. And in fact, look as hard as we will with a meditative mind, we'll never find an enduring self. We find the living process. So if we know that, how shall I live my life? What should my intentions be? And there are 3 unwise views that really take us down some difficult roads. They are, not surprisingly, greed, ill will, and the intentions of cruelty or harmfulness. Now, if my worldview is, I'm me, maybe I'll extend it to a few people nearest to me, and I will do everything I can to get my way. I'll lie, I'll maybe kill, because my needs are, I'm gonna get satisfied through my own power. That leads us in one particular yucky direction where we don't have really good friends and we don't live in a loving world. If, on the other hand, our worldview is, I can't own anything for very long anyway, and nothing I get lasts, and it's possible to enter into more and more loving relationships with people, then we would intentionally cultivate the thoughts that arise and the intentions that arise, we would want to cultivate ones that lead toward more happiness. Making sense? It's like, what seeds to plant? And the first one's kind of, they're renunciation, goodwill, and harmlessness. Renunciation is imagine that. It's not very popular in modernity. When you have Amazon, you don't need to renounce. You can have it this afternoon or tomorrow. But when desires arise, to practice sometimes with, it's what Ramadan is about, it's what Lent is about in the Catholic Church. Having the experience of, I want something, but I don't have to go for it. But I want it, I don't have to. So there's a reining in the natural greed of the human being. Goodwill, the practice of being kind. The Dalai Lama, one of his common refrains is, my religion is kindness. And kindness, where does it start? Being kind to yourself. What about that voice that says those nasty things? Doesn't it really make sense to do the work well, as Ruth was helping me bring to consciousness those codependent, desperate terror thoughts, jealousy, anger, and so on that night, doesn't it make sense to do that with our fears and our self-hatred? And because all those they're just thoughts. They're thoughts and body energy. But why not set yourself free from self-hatred? Self-hatred is not intrinsic to human beings. There are cultures, Tibetan particularly, and the Thais also, I learned, self-hatred isn't a big feature of the culture. Whereas for us, it's like, well, it's normal. Doesn't everyone hate themselves? No. It's a bad habit. It's a bad habit which can be unearthed. So, renunciation, goodwill, harmlessness, non-greed, non-hatred, and patience. Where does patience come from? How do we cultivate patience? It's being impatient consciously. Because we realize impatience is generated through fantasy. I'm stuck in traffic, it shouldn't be like this. And really, it shouldn't be like this. I came here to Portland in 1979. Where did all of you come from? And the traffic now, isn't it stunning? I mean, it's not right. So when it's taking me 45 minutes to take a trip that used to take 15, commonly, the mind can get into this story. It shouldn't. What's wrong? And oh no, I'm going to be in trouble. I'm going to get to this meeting late, and maybe I'll lose the contract. And all of that, it's all fantasy. What's happening? Well, you're sitting in the car, breathing, and there may be a bad consequence to it. But in the meantime, you could be using your practice to create love for the people around you in the other cars. I had a mind boggler with that a long time ago. My son was 2. We were heading on a vacation up near Seattle, and we intended to get out of town in the morning, and then we didn't get out of town. So in the car, there's a little tension between the wife and the husband, and the kid's asleep in the he's asleep in the back, and we get stuck at the bridge. And there's tension. And I look around at the cars, and there's all these ugly people. I mean, ugh. And then I laid back, and I just meditated for a while. And then I thought, well, I could just really relax and think loving thoughts. And I went in, that place of release happened. And I opened my eyes. We were surrounded by angels in all these cars. And I felt so fine. And I looked over at this woman that previously I had these negative thoughts about, and wow, she was pretty wonderful too. It's all in us. Patience arises through consciously suffering impatience and knowing what's going on. So this is the gardening metaphor. And it's about the transformation of our unwholesome states and seeing them enough to realize they are anatta, they are not self, and allowing our natural states to emerge. This is a really interesting, I didn't get this for a long time. Our natural state is love, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. That's who we are underneath the frightened, greedy, little separate self. And it naturally reveals itself when we open up and become really attentive and compassionate toward how much pain we have when we're in I, me, mine. The song of the self. I, me, mine, I, me, mine. Out of the way, it's mine. So that's a very quick zip through with the notion. This is the key part I wanted to be sure to mention. Beyond stress management and some basic psychological well-being, there's this capacity of working with and transforming the mental states that torture us. And it's simply a matter of waking up. Waking up, and often helpful to have somebody to talk to. One of the purposes of community is to have someone you can talk to and say, well, boy, this is what's happening in the mind. And to have someone you can talk to about it who doesn't take it seriously, meaning, oh, you really are a bad, you have that, you really are a bad person. But, whoa, that sounds really painful. So that's about wise intention. What are my intentions? There's a little article, I haven't read it in forever, on robertbeatty.com under resources, I think. It's called, I Want to Be a Buddha When I Grow Up. And that's a little article about this intention. Where do we want to get to in our lives? Where do you want to get to in your life? What would you like to have as a great exercise? What would you like to have on your obituary? In fact, writing one's obituary is a great practice. So how would you like to be remembered? Probably not, if you're in this room. Probably not. Well, she had this great portfolio of stocks, and she had these great vacations, and maybe nothing wrong with vacations or stocks, but wouldn't you rather have, she was known for her generosity and kindness and willingness to really stand up for the downtrodden, or that's kind of, he was willing to put his life on the line for this circumstance where people were really being hurt. Wow, that's nice. So, question. Comment. Complaint. How come I have to do it myself? Why can't someone else do it for me? We've all tried that. If you just marry the right person, it'll all be okay. There also doesn't have to be a comment or question. We could just be quiet.
Thank you, Robert. So I understand that the psychological view is very different than the spiritual view. And yet, the psychological view does provide some understanding of certain kinds of behaviors, particularly the most destructive people in the world who are classified as narcissists and sociopaths and psychopaths and borderline personalities. How do we use the view when it comes to dealing with these people? Because these people, they are among us. There are few of them, but they create tremendous amounts of chaos wherever they are. And they do not seem to be inclined to be empathetic or loving or responsive to attempts to repair things. And as far as I know from my reading in the psychology sciences, psychologists have thrown up their hands at this point because nobody knows what to do with these people to heal them or to change them.
Yeah, thank you. There's a literature that I've spent a little time in that I have two threads. One is basically in my second marriage, my partner adopted two girls from Guatemala. One of them was in a crib for 18 months and had bed sores all over her when she was adopted. And the other was a street urchin who had been, and they both had really serious difficulties. The one who spent the time in the crib, neglected, had, we discovered, reactive attachment disorder. And she didn't do empathy. That in that, that there's that beautiful, beautiful image. You see a new mother or a new father with their baby, and they're stoned out together, right? They're just looking at each other, and there's just this and the baby gets a wet diaper, and the parent comes, or parenting figure comes, changes the baby's freaked out, really is in tremendous distress. And then the parenting figure comes, comforts the baby, nurses them, perhaps feeds them, and then they pass out, and basic trust is established. That happens thousands of times in the first year and a half to 2 years. And there's a region in the prefrontal cortex which is about empathy, which develops through that process. We're not born with it. Right? We're not complete when we're born. Obviously, we're biologically not complete at the brain. And so this little girl that grew up to be a teenager in our house and now is a meth addict in and out of prison. And so I got to know a lot about this through other parents and trainings that we did, and it was so difficult that she blew out of our house pulling a knife on me, and we discovered she'd been throwing the cat against the wall, and this without empathy, without this part of the brain working, we're in deep trouble. And if you were to go to death row and do brain scans, most of the people there would have this problem, this true psychopathic inability to feel. Their mirror neuron process is somehow broken. That's one theory. There's another, which is that 5% of us are born psychopathic. And that it doesn't matter what family you're in, it's just that this thing happens. And there's some very interesting research about that, which means there are people who, they often wind up as the head of corporations or countries. It's true. It's true, because to be able to say, this would be more efficient if we fire these 5,000 people. That takes a certain, one can do it. It doesn't mean everybody is, obviously, but there's a certain percentage. And the real crux is in your last comment. How can we help them? Nobody can help anyone who doesn't want to be helped. You're here today. You spent your Sunday morning here. That's quite a large sacrifice, because something's motivating you from the inside, saying, I want to be happier. I want to be, I watch, some of my behaviors are not very skillful, the way I treat myself, or the way my addiction carries me away, or there's this compulsion that I do, and you're here because you've gotten a whiff maybe meditation can help me be a better parent or partner or friend, or maybe I can feel less freaked out all the time, whatever it is. And but if there's no way to impose that on somebody, and it's true, we don't know, at least we don't know how to help people who don't have that capacity for empathy. There may be some in all the years that we were dealing with this young girl, we studied a bunch with, forgetting his name. He was in Colorado. They did holding therapy. And it, up all the way into teenage kids, they would basically wrap them up in a carpet and provoke them, or they get provoked, and they would scream and yell and get really angry, but they couldn't move. And then they would give them condensed milk or something, and then they'd calm down. And that bonding cycle that we do with babies, it seemed as though it would sometimes be functional with the older kids. And there was great controversy about it. And then a child died in the process one time. And but the woman with whom I was in relationship with all that became quite educated in this, and the Unabomber, what was his name? No, similar. Anyway, the Unabomber, yeah, his mother said that he was a normal baby until 7 months. And then he got some kind of a skin rash that was terribly painful, and she took him to the hospital. And then the hospital, he would freak out every time she left. So the hospital asked her to stop coming. And he was in the hospital 2 or 3 weeks. And then when she came, she said, "He never let me hold him again." And what she didn't do, which is what the attachment therapy people would do now, is she'd hold him. You wrap him in a towel and hold him, and he would rage. "Get away, get away." He'd rage, and then at the end of the rage, he'd become vulnerable, and she'd give him something sweet to drink. And then do that. And apparently, in the attachment world, they've discovered you can rescue babies sometimes that have had something like that happen. And also, don't leave them in the hospital. But we didn't know, right, back then. So, and just a note, and we all have a little psychopathy, and we all can be pretty narcissistic, and we all have borderline traits. And so one of the things going through social work school, there's that when you take abnormal psychology, it's like, oh, yeah, it's me. I've got them all. But, and in fact, we do have them all. With the exception of pedophilia, I haven't come across a diagnosis that I haven't encountered in myself, particularly on those long retreats when the craziness comes up, and schizophrenia, just voices, and I mean that's all in us. So how unfortunate that we have folks like that who do cause so much trouble. And so what do? Well, first thing I think that I try to do is stay loving and understanding and realize that this is the way of the world. My daughter and I spent 18 days in Greece, and I changed my terminology for a few of the famous people. Alexander was not the great. Alexander was a murderous, horrid psychopath who everywhere he went, he left carnage. Not someone to emulate. He was a sick man, but very successful in what he wanted to do. So, with any help? Yeah. And where to go? We always come back to ourselves. How to be more loving. How to live in an insecure world with some very sick people in power, how to live in this and stay connected to ourselves and others, and then to do whatever we can do in order to intervene in that. Do we have little creatures? Please invite them. Thank you all for listening and being here and practicing. Thanks to those of you at home. Hello, Pamela and Bill. I've been wanting to say that for a long time.
I was out and about yesterday and I saw a billboard, if traffic problems, call this number.
Yeah.
I had an impulse to call that number. I got a traffic problem, there's too much of it.
Right, right. There's too many of them, of them. Yeah. Ha. Whoa, there's a lot of us this morning. Cool. Yay. Do you have one of these little ones in here? Or are you coming to be among us? You do. Which one? This one? Handsome little guy, isn't he? All right. Hi. I see. That was a strange sound. Well, may I hold your hand? Thank you. May I hold your hand? Would you like to hold our hand? We could be a three connection. So, here we are for a little while, human beings. Why not give the hand on your right a little squeeze and think some kind thought for this person? What kind thought would you offer? A wish, a prayer? And to the person on your left, persons perhaps. Isn't it, it's so nice to incline the mind toward kindness. It's a good habit. And what about the person between these hands? Why not think a kind thought for her or him or them, they? May all beings everywhere benefit from our time together here this morning. Our families, friends, people in the furthest places in the world, those people afflicted with a lack of empathy, and the people around them. To our brothers and sisters of the air, the earth, and the waters, may we all know happiness and its causes. So, we now come to the singing of the song. Is it you too? Yay. Get close to the microphone. And when you're ready, 1, 2, 3,
May all beings be happy. May all beings be happy. May all beings be happy. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Thank you. All right. Now, patience, patience, patience. Everybody ready in the room and at home and abroad? Taking in a big, deep breath? Not yet, I have to count. Got your wish? 1, 2, 3, blow. Yes! We did it. Yay! Thank you all. We have tea and cookies and good people to talk to in the living room.